Hey guys, welcome back. We're on episode number 3, and I'm beyond excited to share this topic with you guys. And the perspective and opinion of someone I hold very dear to my heart, someone whose insight I think will be very interesting and valuable. And I know that there's going to be something to take away from this, and I'm just super excited to share that with you guys. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Cool. Well, what do you want to talk about today?
So I just wanted to get your opinion on, I guess. So I've been asking around. I literally went around my ship and asked people about whether they think people are conversing about sexual health before they actually interact with people in any kind of sexual capacity. And I've asked my mom, I've asked Sam, I've asked a whole bunch of different people. And I even asked this girl today, and the consensus is that a lot of people are not conversing about it prior to having sex and prior to, this or that. And I just wanted your opinion on whether people are doing it in your experience, and if they're not, why do you think it's so hard for people to have these conversations?
Yeah, I I think that's a really good question, and I wish I knew the complete answer to that.
Yeah.
Why? Well, the first part of the question is no. I don't think people are, and I think it's really difficult for people to have that conversation because of a lot of reasons, some of which I don't really understand. But I would say probably one of the biggest reasons why people don't have conversations about safer sex or more conscious sex is it feels a little bit weird the first time you do it.
Okay.
And that could be a result of shame around sex. It could be a result of just lack of exposure to a format for having a conversation about sexual health, about desires, about needs, about the meaning behind a sexual experience, about all the various facets of sex and sexuality that are so important.
Right.
And so I don't know. I wish I had a really good answer for you on why people don't have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, look at the culture. Look at the culture we live in. Sex has this duality to it where it's seen as such a valuable thing, but yet we glamorize sex on television and in movies.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
in real life, when it comes down to having sex, we don't seem to value it as much as we show in popular culture or just in our daily conversations.
Right. It's funny that you say that, because when I was talking to one of the females I'm working with, I said if it's not social media or pop culture, how you just mentioned, or in a book or whatever platform, it's not talked about in a healthy way.
Yeah.
It's not brought up in a healthy way. And I don't know whether, I'm sure that's for various reasons. I'm sure it's because of schools, parents, culture, what have you. She mentioned how she says that she goes around, I mean, first of all, she likes to be in a relationship with someone before she has sex with them, but then she has no problem posing the question hey, have you recently been sexually active? Okay, and then kind of just go on from there with the conversation. And I thought it was super interesting because she mentioned how people forage or whatever they do like papers, like the kinds of papers like that have your results on them or whatever. And I was like, first of all, I couldn't even fathom, like, why would you make that up?
Yeah.
Like, do you not care about yourself enough, or not even just anybody else, just yourself? Like, why would you do that? But she was like, people do it all the time. And I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
All right. And then I guess, and she proceeded to say, like, will people kind of also just assume that they're good because they don't experience these symptoms, or they don't know enough about this to recognize that this doesn't look right or feel right, or whatever the case is. And then I talked to one of my actual friends about it, like maybe a month or two ago, when I first thought of the topic, and he was like, the conversation between him and said female usually goes along the lines of this: you good? And she'll look at him like, I'm good, you good? Like, you straight? And it's just like, that's the that's, you know, the basis of the conversation. That's it. And I'm just like, damn. Good with what? Like, am I good down? Like, is it aesthetically pleasing? Like, is it, you know what I mean? Like, there's
Did you
so
take
many
a shower
different.
today?
You're right.
Yeah.
In my personal opinion, condoms don't, you know, they don't give the same sensation, obviously. But, I mean, I'm not gonna, if it's like I just maybe hooked up with you, or whatever the case, I just met you, and maybe we do want to proceed further, like, you know, keep seeing each other, I'm gonna ask you to do that. You know what I mean? I'm gonna ask you to put on a condom. And I'm not gonna, like, and if you don't want to put on a condom, and like, all right, well, I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable proceeding with this. And that happened to me recently. He didn't want to, you know, use a condom. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm sorry. Like, this can't happen, you know? And the sad part is that, like, I really, really wanted to, really badly, but it ended up being in the situation where, like, okay, I'm really, really glad I didn't do that, because we were, you know, like, home port shifting soon after that, and it was just like, okay, well, I'm probably not gonna see this guy ever again anyway. So I was actually talking to my mom about this earlier, and her and I talk about, like, dating and relationships, and we give our perspective to each other and things of that nature. And I asked her the question too. I said, like, what do you think would make these conversations easier to have? And she was like, that's a very good question. I'm really not sure. And so one thing that I find myself doing, not even consciously, I kind of just do it. If there's like an inkling that I'm, like, sexually interested in somebody, I will ask them, hey, like, when's the last time you had sex?
Yeah.
But it's not like a question where, you know, I want to know because I'm, like, trying to probe or whatever. I want to know because I'm a freak bitch, and I, like, want to know when the last time you had sex. I want to know if it was good. I want to know this. I want to know that. And, like, it becomes like a, you know, a more fun conversation initially. And and then, like, the other questions kind of get easier to ask.
Can I share an idea that I have?
Yeah, for sure.
This is something I've practiced quite a bit over the last year, and I would say in all but one sexual relationship that I've had in the last year. And it's an acronym. The acronym is RBDSM. So it's like BDSM, but with an R in the front. So RBDSM. So R is relationships, and that is, do you have relationships with other people, and what are the nature of those relationships, and you know, are there any agreements that you have in those relationships that I should be aware of?
Okay.
The B is boundaries. Do you have any boundaries with your body or with this interaction that we may or may not have that I should be aware of? And that, you know, that can also be limitations. That can also be just, you know, things where you don't want the interaction to go.
Right.
D is desires. What are your desires for what we're about to do? And that could be, I want to have 1 million orgasms, or I just want to lay here and cuddle. And the thing is, like, both people are going back and forth with this discussion. So if you say, I just want to lay here and cuddle, and your potential partner says, I want to get fucking down and dirty, I want to do anal, I want to, like, come all over your tits, and you're like, okay, well, we're not really aligned here. This isn't going to work.
Right.
Or you might both be on the same page. So, and then just like a caveat with that, and I guess with the whole conversation, is the conversation's not intended to lead to any particular thing.
Okay.
It's really just a conversation to get to know the other person in a intimate way. And it doesn't, because you're having the conversation, that doesn't mean you're about to have sex.
Right. Can we talk about that a little bit? Like, wait. So we should get through our BDSM first.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so the D was desires. And you can also talk about needs there. You can talk about wants. You can talk about, you know, fantasies. And, you know, like, this can go in, like, the cool thing about this whole conversation is it often leads to these little, like, side stories of, oh yeah, I remember this time when, like, I was with this guy and, you know, this happened and this happened. So I don't know. It's just like a fun, like, you know how you said you're a freak bitch and you like to talk about like, it's a fun way because you're both kind of being vulnerable in this conversation.
Right.
So yeah. Okay. So that was the D. RBDS is sexual health. So there's a few things that I like to talk about when I'm talking about sexual health. So I start with, when was the last time that I was tested for STIs?
Okay.
And I like to call out the specific things that I was tested for. And I also like to talk about what I've been vaccinated for. Okay. So I get tested for HIV. I get tested for syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, Hep C. Do not get tested for herpes, HSV 1 and 2. And a test for HPV is, well, I have to admit, I can probably get more educated on this, but the tests for HPV are very intrusive from what I understand and not easy to get. So now there's another caveat to this. So with the bacterial infections in particular, so gonorrhea and chlamydia, you can be tested for those with urine, but urine is only going to show infections that are in the urinary tract. So either in the penis or you know, coming from the urethra. So whoever is being tested, the man or the woman, you can still have those infections in your anus or in your throat. That won't show up on a urine test. So if you've been doing anal sex, or if you've had a cock down your throat, you need to get swabbed in your throat and your ass if you've done either of those things. So that's for the bacterials. And then for vaccinations, so I've been vaccinated for Hep A, Hep B, and HPV. So human papillomavirus, which some people might know as genital warts. Right. So I bring those up too. And then there's like one last thing, and this is particular to me. I have like these two features of my penis that can be surprising to people if they haven't seen my penis before. Okay. And and there's like this birthmark that I have that if the light hits it right, it looks like a wart, but it's the birthmark. Right. So I like to give people a heads up, like, hey, like, there's this mark on the top of my penis that looks like a wart, but it's actually a birthmark.
Okay.
And I don't want this to come up in the middle of sex. Like, you're about to put my dick in your mouth and realize there's this bump and you want to know what it is.
Dude. Oh my God. Okay, yeah. I'm laughing because that's very relatable, and I've actually been in that situation before, but yeah.
Yeah. And then there's like these other little teeny tiny bumps that look, I don't know, they're just like almost invisible, but if you're really studying my dick, you can find them. And so I like to also, during the sexual health part, I like to point out that these two features of my penis have been there since birth, and I've had doctors look at them, and there's nothing wrong with my dick. It's just how it is. It's just how my dick is.
I love that. I fucking love that so much because there's no way that I don't know, like I love that you bring it up because someone may not be comfortable asking about it. You know what I mean? Someone may not be comfortable, like, oh, what happened there? So it's funny because recently I was intimate with someone and he had like a scar, and I was like, well, I think one day I just asked him because, but then I proceeded to say that I haven't asked, despite wondering, because I didn't want to offend you, or I didn't want to, whatever. And then we proceeded to talk about it. But I love that you just, here you go. This is for you. You know what I mean? I think that's super great.
Thanks. Yeah, this is a vulnerable conversation, right? And but the thing is that with vulnerability, you can build intimacy. So talking about like, hey, going back to boundaries for a little bit, that's a vulnerable part of this whole conversation too. Like, so talking about like a part of my dick that has a bump on it, like, it's a little bit vulnerable, and it's but the thing is, if you are vulnerable, if you show your partner or potential partner that I can like open up to you in an emotional way that also like builds intimacy that leads to better sex.
Right.
So, so on sexual health, to finish up that one. So another big part of that is the partners or the sexual history that you've had recently. So since the last time that you were tested for STIs, how many, or, it doesn't necessarily have to be how many partners, but what partners have you had and what was the risk with those partners?
Right.
Okay, so let's say we'll just do an example here. Okay, so I was last tested for all the STIs that I listed, and that was 6 weeks ago. And since then, I've had 3 sexual partners, and one of those sexual partners was with condoms only, and there was no like genital to genital contact without condoms. The other 2 partners were without condoms. One of those partners has no other partners and has been recently tested as well. And then the third partner has one other partner who they have sex with their other partner unprotected, and that other partner has no other partners.
Okay.
So that really gives you a picture of my full range of, the risk that I'm presenting you with.
Right.
But here's the risk to me, and how I'm presenting my risk to you, so that you can make a decision of, one, do I want to engage sexually with this person at all? And if I do, what risk mitigations do I want to put in place? Maybe I don't want to do oral sex with this person, and maybe I only want to have sex with a condom on. Or maybe I'm comfortable having any kind of sex with this person because they've shown that their risk is really low. Or also maybe they've shown that maybe they have a little bit more risk, but they're building trust with me, and I trust that if there is some sort of problem down the road, if 2 weeks from now they're diagnosed with chlamydia, that they're going to call me and tell me and say, hey, Jared, we had unprotected sex 2 weeks ago, and I went into Planned Parenthood and I tested positive for chlamydia. You should probably go get tested. So that, I don't know. I think that's, on the sexual health standpoint, that's the biggest part there is talking about when you were tested, who you had, or what you were tested with, how you got tested, what you've been vaccinated with, who you've been with since you were tested, and who they've been with.
Right.
And then the final part of the sexual health equation is, this is, I think, something that people don't think about very much, but if you and I have sex today, and then I get tested tomorrow, most STIs won't show up on that screening tomorrow.
Right.
So there is it's called like a dwell period or a delay period, or there's a period of time between when you are exposed to a virus or a bacterial infection, that it takes time for that viral load or that bacterial colony to build up enough cells to be detectable in a test. I mean, it's kind of like COVID. Like if someone with COVID was to cough in my face right now, and then 2 hours from now I go get tested, I'm not going to show positive because that virus hasn't replicated enough to be detectable.
Right.
So that is something that I would include in that conversation. Yes, I got tested last week, but right before I got tested, I had unprotected sex with this person, or, you know, here's the kind of sex I had right before that test. And
right.
Here's the risk that might present us.
I got you.
So the final part, I think, is also every single aspect of this is important to me, but the final part is meaning.
Okay.
Like, what is this interaction between us? What does it mean to me, or what am I hoping it will mean to me?
Okay.
If you meet someone at a bar or at the club or at the bus stop or whatever, and you just click and you're like, fuck it, let's go back to my place and have sex. There is some meaning to that, no matter how random or casual it seems.
Right.
You might not know the full meaning today. You might not know what it's going to look like a year from now. But using your best judgment, what does that mean to you today?
That's good. I
think that this sexual encounter will be casual. I don't intend to call you tomorrow or ever again. I'm just trying to get off right now, and that's all I want from this. Or, you know, maybe that happens, and 2 weeks from now you get horny again and you call me, or you send me a snap of your snatch and you're like, hey, you want some of this? And then maybe we have that conversation again, like, hey, last time we talked, you said that you only wanted to do this once, and now here we are again.
Right.
Do you see some other meaning in this interaction?
Yeah.
And, you know, it can evolve. It's okay for it to evolve.
Right.
But the problem arises when you and I have different expectations for what the meaning is going to be from this. If you're looking for marriage and kids and a lifelong commitment, and I'm looking to just get my dick wet tonight and never talk to you again, that's gonna like cause some big problems tomorrow.
Right. When I don't call you back.
Yeah.
Or when I don't answer the phone after you call me 5 times.
Yeah, because you're my future wife and all you wanted was some dick for the night. So yeah. So I'm using extremes here to make the point, but I think it's important to have that conversation. I don't think that it's necessary to have this RBDSM conversation every time you have sex with someone.
Okay.
It's most valuable the first time you are about to interact. And honestly, it's best done when you're not naked and horny and trying to rip each other's clothes off. Like, this is like a conversation. Sense. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so I mean, it might not be the best conversation to have at a restaurant, but I would say, like, if you're gonna meet up with someone, when your head is clear and you're not thinking with your genitals, just give a primer to it and say, hey, before we like start getting to a point where this relationship might turn into a physical one, there's a conversation I would like to have with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then leave it at that. And when the opportunity arises, bring up the conversation.
Right.
So this, I bring this all up because I think what we're lacking is a common language for how to have this conversation.
Yes.
We don't know how to have this conversation, so we don't even have it, because it's like, if I'm thinking, Lex, like, maybe you've never been tested for STIs, or maybe I've never been tested for STIs, and maybe I'm ashamed about that,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to tell you that I've never been tested for STIs.
Right.
And maybe you're afraid to ask if I've ever been tested. Maybe you're afraid to ask if I have other partners.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're afraid to ask what the meaning of this relationship is going to be, or what it means to you right now. But if you know that there's like this shared language or this shared format for having a conversation like this, it really helps. And that's also why I think it's so important to have this conversation when dicks aren't hard and clits aren't throbbing with blood.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense. And thank you for sharing that with me, because or sharing that with everyone, because you're right, we don't know how to have the conversation. Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't know that they should have the conversation, to start asking the question, well, how do I have the conversation? Because when I was growing up, or even now, it's glamorized to have sex with someone, especially if she's new and she's like hot, or he's new and he's hot. Like even now, like I have the conversation with my friends, and it's like, oh, like this guy is super hot, like he's this, he's that, he's got a big dick, blah blah blah, this and that, like very similar to how I talk about you. But like very seldom it's like, do we talk about anything beyond that? I feel.
Is it okay if I talk about the most recent time that you and I were together?
Yeah, go for it.
So the last time we were together, we didn't have this conversation, and it had been a while since we had sex.
Yeah.
And do you remember what you shared with me like a couple days after that, after we had sex?
I did. I do remember.
Can you want to share that with your audience?
Yeah. So we had sex, and I got this very, I guess, worried is what I would say, concerned, because I feel like it was after we talked about like STIs, and we were talking about sexual health or something along those lines, but not ours. And it had I had like a million thoughts a minute, like concerned with like your sexual health, like your history and your risk assessment and this and that, and I'm just like in my head, and I know that I started moving differently. And by moving, I just mean like I started feeling like I was going to start acting towards you differently. And I didn't want to do that. So eventually, like, I had the conversation with you, and then we talked about it a little bit more, and then I felt better after that. But prior to that conversation, I was very like worried and like in my head, and about, what we just did, and whether it was safe, and whether it was the right decision. And it wasn't a very good feeling at all. Yeah. It wasn't And I'm as open as we are with one another. I'm like, well, why didn't we have this conversation like before? You know what I mean? Because it wouldn't have been hard to have. I mean,
Yeah.
at least I don't think so. But then I think also it just would have saved me all of that like emotion and all of that like roller coaster, and then what it could have turned into.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a really good example of how valuable that conversation can be, because you did not seem okay the day after we had sex. The next day we were like driving around and we're talking about just STIs in general, not about
Right.
our own risk. And I was talking about how I'm not nearly as concerned about STIs as I used to be.
Right.
And that seems like that's what kind of set that the wheels in motion in your head of like,
Yeah.
holy shit, what did I just do?
Yeah. Because I was like, I don't know if I should be concerned or not. Like, and I wanted to like, I was back and forth for a minute too, because I was like, well, I don't believe that he would like hurt me on purpose like that. Because one, that's pretty fucked up, and two, that's not you.
Yeah.
So it was also like, okay, well, I don't think that he would do that, but he might not be aware of whatever, or he, this or that. And then once we actually had the conversation, once we actually talked about it, and it's very similar to along the lines of what you just mentioned about like the risk assessment and this and that, what you get tested for, vaccines and things like that. And I was like, okay, well, that makes me feel better. But yeah, I think that how you were saying it it speaks to the value of the conversation. Like, nobody wants to feel like, oh shit,
Yeah.
like did I just make a mistake? Like, did I just like, but I don't know, like, I'm happy that we can laugh about it now.
Yeah.
But there's a lesson here. There's a lesson with the people down the line, or even just each other.
Yeah.
Like, if that, it's been a while. Let's reassess how we're feeling and like this and that. And how I was saying earlier, you're so conscious of things and you get it. And I really appreciate how after I like kind of brought it up, or after I kind of felt the need to be mature for 2 seconds, it was easier. And we just kind of, yeah, it was easier.
But we could have avoided that, all of those like non-helpful feelings, by having the conversation ahead of time.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely, I agree.
So that's my words of encouragement for anyone that is listening that's not had conversations like this. Like, I think we've all done this. We've all done it where we're like, in moments of passion, we just go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that night, later that night when we're trying to fall asleep, or the next day, we're like, what the fuck, man? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I have this little itch. Like, is that a real itch, or is that all in my head? Or like,
right.
like, I'm like 3 days late on my period. Like, maybe I'm pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the thoughts that just become really distracting for your life, and it takes away from the pleasure and the loveliness of what sex is.
Right.
And I think it makes us more hesitant to engage sexually.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of that, I know someone who is super, super afraid to just have sex with people that she's not in a relationship with.
Yeah.
Even, just let's not talk about how even when you're in a relationship, someone could hurt you. But, you know, there's some kind of like safety there for her.
Yeah.
And otherwise, she's just afraid because she's like, well, if I don't have this initial trust with you, or I don't have this, you know, like this net around us, around our relationship, I can't have sex with you. I'm not gonna, you know, engage with you in that way, or I can't. And I think that if you, I mean, well, we're sharing it with everyone, but I'm gonna share like your RBDSM with her because I feel like that's super important, and I feel like it's a really valuable conversation that could potentially, like, it has the potential to bring you closer together for sure.
Yeah.
um how you're saying vulnerability can lead into intimacy. And I think with a lot of females in general, exposing themselves in this way could help their partners and help reach someone in a different way. So um, maybe I'm in a relation, or I want to be in a relationship with this man, but he's not very transparent yet when it comes to these kinds of things. Maybe me bringing it up, I think you were saying this earlier, maybe me bringing it up can like open doors for both of us. And now he's like, oh, okay, well, since this is important to you, oh, by the way, I've been thinking about it too. I just didn't know how to, like, you know, bring it up to you. So yeah, I think that's pretty great. And for the person that I mentioned earlier who is kind of scared to just, you know, venture out and have fun despite me recommending it, maybe she just maybe can have these conversations a little bit better, I guess. And that way she feels like, you know, or she can evaluate it based off of this conversation and then go back and say, make the decision. I think you were talking about that earlier. Make the decision based on, you know, the conversation, whether I want to have sex with you or not.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had a thought while you were talking about your friend that doesn't want to have sex outside of a relationship. And the thought is, why do we want to have sex at all? And why do we want to engage with people at all? Why do we want intimacy with people? And I think ultimately what it is we need connection. And okay, I'll just speak for myself. I don't want to speak for everyone else.
Okay.
But I suspect some people will maybe agree with me. I crave connection.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about an orgasm, because I can do that all fucking day by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Orgasms are easy. Connection is fucking hard.
Dude, it's so hard. I think we were talking about this the other day. Just like, yeah, but go ahead.
And you can connect with someone in a way that doesn't feel safe, but there's still some connection there.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that makes connection feel really good and really fulfilling is when there is safety created.
Right.
And I think what this conversation does is it lays the foundation for safety in that connection. And then it allows for that intimacy, and it allows for the vulnerability that leads to the intimacy. And this doesn't mean that being vulnerable with someone and then being intimate with them is going to lead to a relationship that, you know, this isn't the escalator to marriage.
Right.
This is the door to safety and intimacy, which is the connection that I think a lot of us are craving. So you have to speak your truth when you're having this conversation. You have to be vulnerable with your partner. You have to trust that they are doing the same. And if you're getting vibes that they're not telling you the truth, ask them about it.
Right.
Say, hey, you seem really nervous about this part when we started talking about other partners, like, I just want to encourage you to be very honest with me, because I'm being very honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we both want the same thing here, which is this intimate, vulnerable connection between us. And that's not going to be possible if we don't trust each other.
Right.
So I need you to trust that what I'm telling you is my truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I need you to trust that I will accept your truth. And that actually like leads me to a quick story. So a person that I had a physical relationship with recently,
mm-hmm.
we had this conversation beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And in that conversation, I said, the same thing I said about the partners I've had in the past. I've had 3 partners. 2 of them were without condoms.
Mm-hmm.
One of those partners has sex with another partner, and then left it at that. And so, oh man, this was so hot too. We were hiking along the beach on Kauai, and it was like, we were like pretty fucking horny. And we stopped on this, like on the top of this cliff that was overlooking the ocean. There was these huge waves crashing, and it was so fucking sexy and romantic. And we're like making out. And then she's like, hey, you should sit down. And then she like sat in my lap and was like grinding. And then she had a skirt on and she like took her panties off and was grinding more. And then she like pulled my dick out and was kind of like grinding on it. And then she's like, fuck, I want you inside me so bad. And then she was like, do you know the risk of your partner's partner? Do you know if they used condoms? And do you know if that person has been tested recently? And there was like this brief second in my mind where I was like, I can lie right here, and I can get my dick inside this beautiful woman who wants me inside her so bad right now.
Yeah.
But like, I was honest, and I said, I don't actually know if they use condoms or not.
Right.
And do you know what happened? She said, thank you for being honest. I don't think we should have sex right now, but everything that we're doing is so fucking hot, and I want to keep doing what we're doing, but I don't want to have sex right now. And it was still such a good experience. It's so, like, just thinking about it now, I'm getting like a little bit turned on because it was so hot.
Right.
But my dick didn't go inside her, and that was okay. Because the point wasn't getting my dick wet or an orgasm. The point was this intimate connection with this other person who I like a lot.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's great. That's awesome. I love the whole like scenic part of it. That was great. Let's talk about the result of it and it being okay that it didn't happen right away. It being okay that, because of this brief conversation that we had, we're not going to do this right now, but it doesn't necessarily have to change how you feel about them, or like, that it was super, super hot for both of you and this and that, you know what I mean? Like, it didn't have to change that. It's just, okay, well, we're just going to like, move it to the right a little bit.
Yeah. So I think that she maybe not conscious, maybe she wasn't sitting there thinking like, oh, he can lie to me right now. But I think she could tell she might be able to have known if I was lying, either by changes in my body language or the tone of voice or eye contact or something. But I would say it's a pretty safe bet that she would have known if I wasn't being honest. And then that would have eroded trust. But and let's say even if she didn't realize I was lying, the opposite, telling the truth, it's obvious that I'm telling the truth in that situation when I am saying something that's going to result in us not having sex.
Right.
I told her that I don't know what the risk profile of my partner's partner is, and she knows I could have easily lied there, but I didn't lie, and that built more trust. And that allows for more intimacy in the future. That allows for more vulnerability in the future.
Right.
And
like that net we were talking about.
Yeah. So I think that, to answer your question, the result was we built more trust there.
Right.
We built the possibility of more happening in the future, where if somehow she would have figured out that I was lying, that would have taken away the likelihood that something else will happen in the future there.
Yep.
And I want something else to happen in the future.
You know how you guys were like, you know, everything was very hot and very romantic and very steamy. And I think people, you could have lied. And I think people, there's something maybe like a instant gratification kind of thing that people crave. And I think that because you delayed it, because you were willing to be like, oh, I don't really know, that there's something to say about that too. Like, yes, there's trust, but I feel like there's just a level of maturity there too. I mean, I don't think me and you talk about being mature very much because we don't have to, but but I for the people who may be like, you know, younger or older or whatever, I think there's a level of maturity there that speaks to how mature someone is when you can just be like, we can like delay this gratification. We can delay because I'm being honest with you, because or whatever. It's okay that we do delay it because now, how you were saying, it builds more intimacy, it builds more trust.
So I have this idea in my head about why it's so important for us to talk about conversations like this.
Okay.
And the first time that I was tested for STIs was, I think it was like not too far before when you and I first had sex. So we'll say I was 28 or 29 years old at that time.
Okay.
The very first time in my life I had been tested for STIs.
Mm-hmm.
And I had not a lot, like, you know, I'd been married at that point for, 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
So in a monogamous relationship for 8 years, and I had 3 or 4 partners before that in my life, but I'd never been tested for STIs. And I would say it's probably a pretty safe bet to say that if you've had no symptoms of an STI for 8 or 9 years of being sexually active, you're probably safe. But the fact is, I was 28 or 29 years old the first time I ever even considered going to have an STI test taken. And the reason for that was I never thought I needed to. And I didn't know how to go get a test. And I didn't know how to talk about sexual health. And I didn't know how to talk about my desires or anything in this conversation that we've been having today. And so I would say that's pretty old for me to be discovering that stuff. I want to keep pushing that down in age. I want my daughters, who right now they're nowhere close to having sex, but I want them to have this tool or have the ability to have this conversation the first time that they have sex. And that's not going to happen if we don't talk about it. If we continue to make sex this taboo topic that we don't teach each other, and we don't keep teaching the younger generations how to safely talk about sex or how to comfortably talk about sex, we're going to continue seeing all of the problems that we have with it. And we're going to continue seeing people getting married because they feel like they have to, because they got pregnant when they weren't planning on having a baby. We're going to see people super pissed at each other because I got chlamydia from so-and-so and they didn't tell me they had chlamydia. Well, they didn't fucking know. Right. Like, because they haven't been getting tested. They haven't been having these conversations. So I just think that if the more we talk about this, And the more we talk about it with even kids in an age-appropriate fashion, if we can teach them these tools, we can start changing the way that sex happens.
Yeah.
We can start having more meaningful sex as a society. We can start having safer sex as a society. We can start being more conscious with our partner's feelings, with our partner's desires and wants and needs. We can figure out where we can meet those wants and desires and needs where we can't. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it leads to more pleasure.
Yeah.
And pleasure's fucking great.
Yeah, I was going to say, who doesn't want pleasure?
Yeah. So I'm not going to be able to stop my daughters from having sex. And I don't want to. I want my daughters someday to have sex because sex is great. But I want my daughters to go have sex in a way that is safe for them, mm-hmm. that they're going to have their needs met, they're going to have their desires fulfilled, and they're not going to feel like shit the day after they have sex. Yeah. They're not going to be paying attention to every single hour of the month, waiting to see if they're late for their period.
Right.
And same for my future partners, and same for your future partners. And I don't know. I'm on a soapbox here talking about how we need to talk more about sex. And I don't know. I think it's really great that you're doing this podcast to have conversations like this so that we can keep the conversation going, so that we can start the conversation with people who aren't willing to, or people who don't know how to have conversations about sex.
Right.
So I just wanted to say thank you for doing what you're doing, because it's so, I just deeply believe that it's a very important conversation to have.
I deeply believe it is also, and thank you for being just awesome and sexy and just open and like just all the things, because you being like open-minded and you being, but also emotionally practical, if you can put those two together. Thank you just for
you're welcome.
Thank you. I'm gonna wrap up and say thanks to my audience. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for everything. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Make sure you get notifications on Spotify. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Utilize that Gmail. And yeah, thanks guys.